Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Bhavna Sharma. I work as a medical registrar in the NHS London, and this is your PLAB 1 lecture series on the high yield topics essential for revision, as well as knowing some topics which are going to be extremely important when you come and work with us in the NHS, especially if you're working in the emergency department or acute medicine. Now, PLAB 1 tests you on essential CT scans, which are what we call the red dot CT scans that you can definitely not miss and are a part of the acute emergency medical management protocols. So very important CT scans. The goal is not to make you a radiologist. The goal is to make you a good medico who can read CT scans while waiting for the radiologist to report them, and someone who gets full marks on their PLAB 1 head CT. Alright, now the thing that I have to confess is that I hate anatomy. But the thing which is good about anatomy is if you link it with what you would use in daily life, it starts to make a little more sense. So I've discussed very basic anatomy here with regards to the brain and what will be used on your PLAB 1 head CT scans. Let's just start with the layers of the brain. Now guys, you need to remember the mnemonic for this. So it is PAT. Okay, so starting from the innermost to outermost, that's going to be your pia mater, your arachnoid mater, and your dura mater. The thing I want you to remember about pia mater is nothing. It's basically just a layer which sticks to the brain, and it's very closely stuck and doesn't really appear on your head CT scans, but just keep in mind that it is there. The second layer in between is the arachnoid mater. This will become important when we're discussing some types of bleed in the brain, the subarachnoid hemorrhage. Remember, this is an avascular layer, so it doesn't really contain a lot of blood vessels, but it does dip down to create certain parts in the brain which we call cisterns. Remember, we'll mention cisterns later, so just note it down. It'll become important. Now, the outermost layer is your dura mater, which is the juicy layer of the brain. So on the screen it looks blue in color. Indeed, it is very rich in your veins, and it forms the dural venous sinuses or the venous system of the brain. This will become very important when we talk about subdural and epidural hematomas / hemorrhages. That's it. You don't need to know anything else about the layers of the brain. Now, don't get scared by this image, guys. This is what a normal head CT looks like. I don't want you to look at anything else. Just concentrate on the things that I'm telling you. You can see a vein in the center. That's your ventricles. We'll discuss ventricles in a little more detail later on, but what I want you is to look at is what the size of the vein is and where it's located and the shape of it. That's it. You don't need to know anything else. When it becomes abnormal, that's when it will become important, and we'll discuss it. Now, the head CT is a little funny. You guys might remember from medical school that the outer layer of the brain is gray. So when you see all the autopsies, the brain looks a little gray. But when you cut it, you can see some white matter beneath. Now the head CT is opposite. That's a bit of a curveball, I would say. Now on your head CT, the outer layers that you can see, they look white in color. So that's going to be your gray matter. And the inner layers, they look blackish or grayish in color, or at least a little bit darker, but they are actually your white matter. Okay, what I want you to concentrate on is that it looks like a walnut or almost like a leaf. So you see these beautiful striations of your gray matter curving into the white matter. This will become important when we discuss gray and white matter differentiation. So just have that image of a walnut or a leaf in your mind. the last thing I want you to look at is the center of the brain. You can see some white lines. What I want you to just know is that these are the dips of the dura mater into the center of the brain, something that in the cerebrum it's called forked cerebri. What I want you to just remember is that the brain looks symmetrical, so it's equal on both sides, and the forked cerebri divides it into two equal parts. Okay, that's it. You don't need to know anything else about the radiology of the brain or the anatomy of the brain to solve most of your PLAB 1 questions. Okay, now two important points that you need to understand, or two essential concepts that you need to know for your PLAB 1 exams. The first one is the Monro-Kellie doctrine, which was done by two different scientists. Now, the crux of this is, or the main point of this is, that the sum of the volumes of the brain tissue, CSF, and blood in the brain are equal. Okay, so if one decreases, then you gain the other. For example, if you start to lose your brain or lose your mind, you're going to either gain some CSF or some blood. It sounds like a bad bargain, I would say. That's it. Nothing else for Monro-Kellie doctrine. This will become important later on. Just keep that concept in mind. The second image that you see on the right of your screen is what the differentiation of black to white appears on the head CT. Now, the way that the CT scan works is that things which stop the passage of the radiation are going to appear the whitest, and the things which allow radiation to pass through are going to appear the darkest. So your bone is going to appear white, and the things which go on from their density after bone, for example things like your white matter, your hemorrhages, they're going to appear whitish, and things which allow radiation to pass through like air are going to appear black. Similar to this, the fat, it allows radiation to pass through, it's also going to appear a little black. That's it. You don't need to know anything else about the head CT. Now let's try to do something fun. When you go and approach a head CT, or you go and approach a head CT scan when you're sitting in A&E or on your PLAB 1 exam, the approach is like Taylor Swift's famous song Bad Blood. So you remember the mnemonic, blood can be very bad. Okay, so that's going to be, you're first going to look at evidence of bleeding. Then CAN stands for cisterns, B stands for brain, V stands for ventricles, and BAD stands for bone. So in the order of importance, the things that you have to be the most worried about, the first one is the blood. Now, you might have the intuition that if somebody's got blood on their brain, it's definitely going to be very, very serious. Guys, epidural hematomas and subdural hematomas or hemorrhages are extremely important. They appear a lot of times on your PLAB 1 exams, and even in real life when you're reading at head CTs in ED, you're going to get lots of subdural hematomas. If you miss them out, you're going to create a very bad impression in front of the examiner or in front of your consultant. So make sure you understand that concept right now. After a while, it often becomes a matter of pattern recognition. So it's just recognizing the shapes that we see here, and when you see that particular shape on your exam or in real life, you should be able to completely jump at the causation or the reason for the bleed in the brain. Starting with the epidural hematoma. The way I try to remember epidural hematoma is that E stands for eye. So if you see on the head CT, you can see a bright white area on the left upper corner of the brain. It looks like the shape of an eye. So remember this shape. It's going to differentiate it from its brother, the subdural hematoma. Why is it called an epidural hematoma? Epi means above, dura means the dura mater that we discussed. So it's a bleeding on top of the dura mater. So the most common cause of this is a traumatic injury. So when somebody has, for example, a high-speed road traffic accident, which is often the question which is given on your PLAB 1 exam, they might have a fracture of the skull. And the most common artery which is affected is your middle meningeal artery. Now because it's an artery, it's going to be a high velocity bleed. So if you can imagine, if you've got a tense skull on this side, which is actually a bone, and you've got a dura mater which is like a membrane, and you have a high speed bleed, you know the way that is going to expand? It's going to expand like a crescent. So that makes sense intuitively, that you'll see a crescent shaped bright red spot. Okay, so the CT scan has made life a little easy. The most dangerous thing, it shines bright on the head CT, and it's very, very difficult to miss, especially now that you've seen this lecture. Sometimes this might not be tested on your PLAB 1, but this can happen, is that because it's a bleed on the surface of the brain, it can create increased pressure in the brain. So it can lead to what we call a third nerve palsy, which is something that you see on the left side of your screen. This is more important for your MRCP exams, but if your PLAB 1 people want to give you a difficult question, any bleed in the brain is going to put pressure on the third nerve, which is going to look like a person with a fixed, dilated, droopy pupil. So all the actions of the third nerve, they're going to get affected. Alright, that's it. Nothing else about a epidural hematoma. Now subdural hematoma, a very, very common presentation. It's often the most common bleed that you're going to see when you come and work in the NHS. So you'll have the classical history of an elderly person who's been having falls at home, or an alcoholic who's been passing out on the street, so they're having falls without really someone else noticing. And when you get a head scan done for their confusion, you see this crescent moon shaped structure on your CT scan. Okay guys, this is a little bit out of the course, but when bleeding starts, the blood appears bright red, and then it gradually gets a little grayish in color. But on your exam, you'll mostly get acute bleeds, which are going to appear in this beautiful classical appearance of your white crescent shaped moon. Okay, now imagine if you've got like 2 layers of the dura, and they've got a lot of juicy veins in them, what we call the bridging veins. They're 2 very, very pliable membranes, or very, very elastic membranes, and then you have a slow bleed. Now the way that an artery bleeds, even if you've had a cut before, the way that an artery bleeds, it's very, very fast. Okay, but when the vein bleeds, it's a bit of a slower bleed, because that's just basically the speed at which blood flows in these 2 types of vessels. Now venous bleeds are generally slow. Okay, so you've got 2 pliable layers of meningeal membranes, and in between them you've got a slow bleed. Okay, so the bleed appears like a crescent moon because the blood is able to creep beneath the pliable membranes. Okay, so just remember the shape that you'll see, the fact that it's due to the bridging veins, because remember, when you've got an elderly person, they're going to have thin veins, and they might have a little bit of brain atrophy, so veins get ruptured a bit easily. And similar in alcoholics, they're going to have thin veins which tend to rupture easily. So they're your classical presenters of subdural hematoma, and just remember that characteristic shape. Because this is a slow bleed which tends to creep on the surface of the brain, this tends to have a slower or a more insidious onset. So what insidious means, it's not as dramatic as a young person who's had a head trauma and a epidural bleed. It's a bit slower, so you'll have an elderly person who's been having falls at home and they've just come in with confusion. Okay, so very important to know about this image. Make sure that you make a screenshot of it in your mind. Alright, now the epidural and the subdural hematoma are extremely important on your PLAB 1 exam as well as real life. So this image basically differentiates between the two. So let's just revise. We've discussed that the epidural hematoma is an arterial bleed and your subdural hematoma is a venous bleed. The epidural hematoma is lens shaped or the eye shape because E stands for eye, and the subdural hematoma is a crescent moon shaped. The appearance or the clinical presentation of an epidural hematoma is very dramatic. You might want to remember the term lucid interval. So you might have someone who loses their consciousness and then regains it and then loses it again. So that's the classical presentation of an epidural hematoma, especially in someone who's been in a major accident. That's just because the layers, the compensatory mechanism of the CSF and the blood, they take a little time to get completely distorted, and that's why you get a lucid interval. You don't really need to know about the pathophysiology, but just remember the term lucid interval, while a subdural hematoma is going to be a little more chronic or insidious in course. That's it. You don't need to know anything else. But guys, if you see this on your PLAB 1 exam, please don't make a mistake, and if you see this in real life, definitely don't make a mistake. These are critical diagnoses to detect, because if you give a patient with a subdural hematoma or an epidural hematoma even normal DVT prophylaxis, that's going to be extremely harmful. So these are diagnoses which need to be recognized even by junior doctors. Moving on to the other two types of bleed that we're going to discuss. There's going to be one special one, but this is the more benign forms or the more easy forms of bleed, which are a little bit easier to recognize, are going to be your intraparenchymal bleed. So intraparenchymal, which means within the parenchyma. So it's basically just a bleed in the middle of the brain. Then we have the intraventricular hemorrhages, which is the bleed in the bean. So the bean that we saw before is going to look white. The way that it looked before, guys, we discussed it before. Now it looks a little bit white. So that means there's a bleed in it. Recognize this. Sometimes it might be a little bit more difficult to recognize these, as you might just see a tiny sliver of blood at the bottom of the ventricles. That's just because the way that the head is when the patient is going into a CT scanner, the blood tends to accumulate at the bottom of the ventricle. So you just might see a tiny fluid level at the bottom of the ventricle. So that might be a little bit difficult, but on your exam, the main bleeds which are going to appear are your subdural, your epidural, and what we're going to see next, the subarachnoid hemorrhage. The way I try to remember subarachnoid is, you might have heard of the term arachnoid. So arachnoid or arachne in Latin means spider. So anything which is spidery is going to be called by arachnoid. Okay, you might have heard of the term arachnodactyly, which means spidery fingers or long fingers, often seen in people with muffins. This is a little bit the same derivative of the Latin word. So the way that it looks on your CT scan is the scan that you see in the center. Notice the difference in between the normal and the abnormal scans. In the subarachnoid hemorrhage, you can almost see a spider sitting in the middle of the head CT. Don't miss this. It is very important. Now, they might tell you on your anatomy books that it's related to the circle of Willis. The way that I try to remember the image in my mind is that I just try to remember this image. I'm not really looking at the labelings of anything else, but I just see that the location of the circle of Willis is very similar to where the spider is sitting. So any Aneurysm or any AV malformation in the middle of the brain might lead to a subarachnoid hemorrhage. The way that they give the history on your PLAB 1 exam is its association with someone with a kidney disease or autosomal polycystic kidney disease. Now, sometimes you might not have this classical appearance on your head CT, but the patient might come in with the classical history of a thunderclap headache. So a 10 out of 10 headache which suddenly comes out of the blue, and they've got a history of family members having similar symptoms. That's when, even in real life, you're going to admit this patient to your medical ward, and in a period of 24 to 48 hours, you're going to do a lumbar puncture on them, provided the head CT doesn't show any features of raised intracranial pressure and the eye exam doesn't show any papilledema, because that's going to, if you do that in someone who's got raised intracranial pressure, if you're going to put a needle into their back, the brain will get sucked down and then you'll get soothed, or the patient might die, which is worse. So just remember that if the patient doesn't show this, then you're going to do the lumbar puncture and you'll see the classical orange CSF or the xanthochromia or the blood stains CSF. How are you going to treat this patient? Because often they show you this image and ask you the treatment. So the treatment for anyone is always starting with ABC. You concentrate on their airway, breathing and circulation. Because this is the bleed, and the way that the body responds to a bleed is by creating a spasm to stop the bleed. The spasm might actually be a little bit more harmful than the actual bleed. You prevent that vasospasm by giving them nimodipine, which is your classical calcium channel blocker. You also need to remember is that the treatment for this, all the neurosurgeons, I know they're very fancy and very rich compared to us physicians, but what they do is that they basically drain the blood, so craniotomy or a burr hole. Alright, so that's your subarachnoid hemorrhage done. It's a little bit more tricky compared to your epidural or your subdural or the rest of the intraparenchymal or ventricular bleeds, but this does appear on your exam a lot of times. Guys, on these PowerPoint slides, you're going to see a star on the top right of your screen. What that means is that it is a favorite PLAB question. So you can see that star or sun there. Moving on, we saw in our blood can be very bad is that the second letter was C. So C is going to stand for your cisterns. I don't want you to look at that image and start panicking. You don't need to remember anything else for your PLAB except just understanding that concept that cisterns are basically invaginations of the subarachnoid layer. So they're baskets of tissue in which blood can often get trapped. Why do we need to do this? Just to know and understand that subarachnoid hemorrhage presents with blood in the cisterns. Because this is an invagination of the subarachnoid system, it can appear like blood in the cistern. So anytime you get a subarachnoid hemorrhage, the basket is going to fill with blood. So if you see that star shaped or spider shape, that's basically blood in the cisterns, which are your suprasellar, ambient and sylvian cistern. But what you just need to recognize is the pattern. And that's it. Your PLAB 1 exam is solved and your consultant is very impressed when you recognize a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Moving on, blood can be very bad. The third letter is V, which stands for your ventricles. Now, the way that I try to understand ventricles is that it's like the bathtub for the brain. So it's basically the system which bathes the brain or bathes the brain in cerebrospinal fluid. These are the beans that we saw before. That's it. Anything else doesn't need to be studied. Now, ventricles is a concept I do find a little difficult to wrap my brain around. If you got that joke, just smash a like on this video. Now, the way that we remembered ventricles before, when we look at the normal appearance, we saw the shape of the bean. It looked very beautiful and it was symmetrical, and the size on this looks a little bit larger than what we saw before. this is indeed ventricular dilatation. Now the classical question on your exam is going to be someone with either hydrocephalus or a blockage in the ventricular system or the CSF drainage system, or someone who's got normal pressure hydrocephalus. This is actually the way I try to remember it is by the 3 W's. So wobbly, someone who's got abnormal gait; wacky, someone who's got abnormal mentition; and wet, which is someone who's got urinary incontinence. Now a person presenting with these symptoms might have normal pressure hydrocephalus. So that's basically that when you measure the pressure of the CSF, it's going to be normal, but the ventricles look dilated as if there's an obstruction in the ventricular system. Don't get confused. If you see wobbly, wacky, wet and see that, you're going to just tick normal pressure hydrocephalus and you're going to pass your PLAB 1 exam. Now sometimes or even in most of the cases, when someone gets old, you tend to lose brain tissue. And you know, we remember the Monro-Kelly doctrine: when you lose one thing, you gain the other. So when someone with age loses brain tissue, you can see almost the progression of brain tissue being lost on these 3 images, moving from the left to the right. You can see that the ventricles are becoming larger, while before the ventricles looked a little bit smaller, but they still look equal on both sides. This is something that you just need to remember when you see normal geriatric CTs. When you come and work in the NHS, you're going to see this. This is basically just dilatation of ventricles associated with age. That's it, nothing else to be remembered. Now these 2 images are your slit-like ventricles and the ventricular effacement. Remember, we talked about how the ventricles are the bathtub or the drainage system of the brain. Any blockage in these ventricles can either lead to them becoming very large, or sometimes one part can get blocked, or the brain can get very inflamed, or the brain can become very large, and as per the Monro-Kelly doctrine, then you're going to lose out on your ventricles. So in people who've got a major brain injury, or they've got an inflammation of brain on one side, you might see these patterns. These don't really appear on your PLAB 1. They can appear very rarely, so just remember those images. Just remember that the beans are lost. Alright, now if you see this on your real life, or you see this in your exam, please do not call up the radiologist. These are benign calcifications which appear on your brain. Now the choroid plexus is the plexus which is going to generate your CSF, and it's often associated with calcium deposits. So this appearance of these white spots is not actually blood. This is just the calcified choroid plexus. If you lose this, you're going to have a very dry brain. So this is a normal appearance for the brain. You can also see this sometimes. This is again not a bleed. This is the pineal gland. Remember, the gland which produces melatonin. This can also become calcified sometimes and appear like that. Please do not ring up the radiologist in the middle of the night saying that the patient has a bleed on their brain. This is completely normal, and the radiologist is going to get really angry. Alright. So that was your part A of high yield revision for PLAB 1 exam for HCT. I hope you guys have learnt a little or maybe a lot. Keep revising these lectures. You can take some screenshots in case you want. But we'll continue this lecture and we'll move on to the other parts of blood can be very bad in our part B. Good luck.